Okay, yes. Good morning. Good morning. So I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. Sorry, it can feel further away. I know the room did not get bigger and gorgeous. For some reason, you feel very far away. It is 9:03. Gonna call the Indianapolis Technical Committee to order at 9:03. We're gonna go around the room and do introductions. I'm Deanna Gremley with the IMPO. Kristen Sanchez, MPO, and the Pearl MPO. Andrea Miller, or
Brian Will,
Mark Woodson, Portsmouth,
Neil Bantry, City of Carmel.
Scott Singleton, Town Plainfield,
Rob Wood, I, Alan Wood.
Jennifer Gephardt, Serta.
Glenn Morrow, City of Greenfield,
Chad Bell, City of Westfield.
Brian Cannon, Town of Avon. Mark St. John, City of Canal.
Did you do their brother?
Paul Young, City of Greenwood. Daniel Johnson County. Mark Drive across the
Andrew Stein, HNTB. Greg Budd, HNTB.
Allie Krupke, Noblesville.
Brad Davis. Yeah.
Yeah. How you rated it? Amy Connor, the engineering. That's great.
Yeah. I'm gonna look at it.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna start this now, just so it has the opportunity to work its way through the group. If you don't know, we are meeting all the planners doing regional planning roundtable, which has been very helpful both on the planning front and the MPO front, talking about regional land use issues. We are talking about doing something similar with data and GIS folks. Except the issue is we don't really know who your GIS folks are. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass this around. If you have somebody that is data oriented or GIS, I get the GIS and data folks may not actually want to in person. That one will probably be like a meeting or virtual. But we just want to make sure that everybody has access to sharing data. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass that around the room. First item on the agenda is meeting minutes of February 4th. Has everybody had the opportunity to review the meeting minutes? Any additions or corrections? This is an item for approval. Okay, I have a motion by Will Light.
Second.
Second by Mark. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion carries. We're going to cover items 3 and 4 with Kristen. The first up is the transportation program amendment.
Everybody hear me? All right, first and foremost, I want to introduce everybody to Lauren Reeson. She is our newest hire at the MPO and will be working the tip section. We're very excited to have her. She's been with us for over a month. So maybe you've started seeing emails from her. If you haven't, you will. So Q2, quarter 2 tip amendments will go out for public review and comment on the 3rd for 2 days. Let's get to the right side. This quarter, we received 20 INDOT amendments. Wanted to note that one request came in slightly after the tech packets went out. That asked for expedited process on it because the project is supposed to go to a letting, I believe, in late summer, so we need to get it to, it is the one that is asterisk, the 2201-247, a lighting project in Greenfield District. And then we received 23 local amendment requests this quarter, including 14 Indigo requests, 8 new INDOT rural funded projects, and 1 project that would affect IMPO's annual allocation. It comes from Indianapolis, their County Line Road. It was a widening project from Depot to Wood Creek Drive. It was awarded through the state fiscal year 2027 call about a year and a half ago. The city has been looking at the county line corridor for some time now and came to us a couple months ago just saying that they're reevaluating their plans for the corridor, are reducing it from roadway widening, I believe from 2 lanes to a 5-lane section, down to 2 lanes with a center turn lane. They're proposing to make this switch in the program. It would reduce their funding from the IMPO by $1.35 million, and then they're asking to move the project from state fiscal year 2027 to 2028. Those are all the amendment requests for the second quarter. Any questions or open discussion on any of them?
Yeah, for the Indianapolis one, is it really, is it gonna be shipping from 28 or are there?
There should be.
Kristen, can you repeat the question?
Daniel asked if they would be adding funds to 2028 or shifting. They are shifting and reducing. I believe the total amount that they had was maybe around 5.6. And it's being reduced by 1.35 with the change in scope. So no additional funds and moving what they were awarded for 2027 to 2028. Questions? Item for acceptance.
Second.
I totally missed the motion and barely, and Daniel, okay. And who's the second? Becky. I have a motion by Daniel Johnson, second by Becky. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Likewise, motion carries. Kristen, agenda item number 4, recommended project.
Up next, we have our state fiscal year 2029 call for project recommendations. We opened this call for projects last fall on October 6th. Held it open for, I think it's very off, for about 6 or 7 weeks though, closed the day after Thanksgiving. Staff began our review in December and January. The total funding available was about $72 million when we introduced the call to you guys last fall. We did have some savings that we added into the pot over the few months when applications were being submitted and during our review. So we're ultimately recommending a little over $76 million from the unused funds from the 5% set aside that we requested to you guys in December. So what was not used went back into the pot. And then in calendar year 2025, the IMPO earned a little over $1 million in some dividends for the federal funds and exchange dollars that we are investing until they are needed for construction. And then we're also seeing lettings come in consistently under, which is a positive change for what we've seen over the past few years. So we're adding those savings back into the pot. We did receive 58 applications totaling over $200 million. And just a reminder that all applications are reviewed based off of the existing selection criteria that we've had for the past 7-8 years, and recommended based off of NTP allocations. We're recommending 18 projects from 9 different LPAs, totaling a little over $76 million. We did issue these recommendations out to tech and policy in early March. We received no comments. And it went out for public review and comment on March 23rd. I believe it closes tomorrow. and we also have not received any comment. So it's been a very quiet month for us. Here are the recommendations as they stand and were issued. Are there any questions of any of the projects being recommended for 2029 and one for 2020 or 2031? I hope you guys have seen that.
Any questions? So I will tell you, if you were recommended in this list of projects, I did reach out to you earlier this week. We do anticipate assuming all the recommended projects pass policy to do what we call check presentation again. So I've reached out to you and were your policy maker, or both, and your PIO, and I happen to know who they were. And we definitely are interested in doing that again. Just for social media opportunities, letters, we put the pictures in our annual reports. Is an item for approval once you feel comfortable.
Brad Davis, motion to approve.
Second, Ryan Williams.
A motion by Brad and a second by Ryan. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, likewise. I will tell you, I did have them shut off the blower in the field.
Good.
So hopefully that makes hearing a little better. They did say it could get hot very quickly. So, we'll be playing with that as necessary. So, Kristen.
Final item for me today. We wanted to give you guys just a brief update on the selection criteria process that we have been undertaking since last summer. Just as a reminder, we contracted with High Street Consulting last May and kicked off about a year-long process of updating our selection criteria because it has not been updated in well over a decade. We wanted to make better linkages to the MTP and the other work that the IMPO does to show that and reflect it through the projects that we recommend. We have hit a little bit of a delay. I'd say we were hoping to bring the finalized recommended revised scoring criteria for you guys in June. That might still happen, but it's becoming very unlikely. Part of the process in updating it is changing from you, the LPAs, will no longer be submitting the different criteria in MyTip, but we'll more so be looking for a project description and location, and then making an export into ArcPro to do more of a spatial analysis, to really use map layers and GIS information that the MPO has and NDOT has provided throughout the state to do a more of a spatial analysis, to be able to review and score projects moving forward. This required an updated spreadsheet, I'd say, from MyTip's software as a service provider, Eco Interactive. We did make that request to them for them to begin working on that and developing it in December. It ended up taking longer than we expected, and I think they expected as well. We finally got a revised or finalized export from them, I believe, last week. And so our consultant industry is looking at that now to see if it is going to meet our needs, to determine our pathway forward. We hope that we've received it now. We'll be able to sort of regain our process and get us to the finish line. But because we don't know this and where we stand and what the approval path forward is right now, maybe it's August, hopefully it's not later than that. We're gonna try and set up a meeting with our subcommittee to determine the speed of maybe this fall's call for projects, what your comfortability is with a new process and how quickly you guys would like to jump into a call for projects, or if you guys need more time after the approval to be able to look at the revised process and the applications you might want to submit. So we'd like to have those conversations in the next couple weeks. The final point, the active transportation plan, for those who are on the subcommittee, we have relayed the information for our transportation alternatives scoring. We were looking into revising that to pretty much fully flow off of the active transportation plan. In order to do that, we needed to better understand the scoring behind that. And we are been unable to replicate the scoring from the consultant who originally developed it a year or two ago. So we hit a snag with that as well, which could cause questions into going off of if we continue to use that for the revisions or if we hold off until we update the active transportation plan. So we have a lot of unknowns right now.
Yeah.
We hope to have some clarifications and I don't know, hope to see the light in the next couple months as to clearing things up. But just if you've been wondering where things are at.
So,
Yeah.
can I just add a couple of things? I'm very aware that you, or I've heard that LPAs normally start discussing late spring, early summer, what projects are going to submit to the. Right, you start like, right, hiring engineers, if you need to do engineering estimates, those types of things. Under the new scoring criteria, because we don't have it quite right fleshed out. I know there are LPAs that are like preliminarily scoring projects and saying like, oh, look, this one looks like it scores well, we should put resources behind it and submit to the IMPO. And so those are some of the conversations I need to have with the steering committee is for a fall call. Right, when do you need to have that scoring criteria in place? Also, don't want to rush, there needs to be a level of comfort and transparency on what is changing and the larger impacts and why it's changing. Yeah, so we just need to have some frank conversations with some of those steering committee members and get feedback on what makes sense, because right, if this were a normal call, you could preemptively kind of score your projects and understand where you would fall, since we can't tell you what the new scoring criteria looks like. You don't know, right? Those projects are going to score 85 or 45. Yeah, so I think Laura's been in contact with the steering committee members on that. I will also add another, just we're going into unknowns. I'm currently actively having conversations with the Indiana DOT. Fiscal year 29 was the last year of our federal exchange agreement, so we need to renew that, or would like to renew that to continue to exchange our funding. There's an unknown, right? The transportation bill expired September 30th this year. And Commissioner Quest is a little apprehensive because it is unknown what the future funding of transportation looks like. And so we're working through some of that. Questions, conversation, points of information, thoughts, opinions?
It's very quiet this morning. All right, we'll reach out. I'll get.
And just I won't comment, and it's probably because I'm digitally challenged, so it's called out. The doodle poll that you put out, the steering committee, I couldn't get it. It kept saying failed to submit every time I submit it. I don't know if anybody else had that problem, or just me. Probably just me. I just thought I'd let you know.
Okay. You just need one. We'll figure it out. I didn't even know.
Yeah, I asked, I was like, do I need to fill this out? And Kristen said, no. So I did not click on the link.
Those times there were more.
Yeah.
All right, well, reach out if you guys have any questions over the next couple months. And I hope we'll have some better information for you guys by June. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Next up, status update. Patrick, Abby, I saw Patrick invited. There you are. Okay. A lot has happened since we last met, the end of the legislative session. There are definitely some impacts to the local. So I have Patrick and Abby here to talk about some of those.
Thank you. Yes, so it was a very fast session, it's about 2 months. And, you know, famous last words, they always say they're not going to do much, and they actually did quite a bit, especially. So we'll go through.
Politicians are liars. Okay. Yeah.
So, we'll go through some of the bills that will likely impact rural areas, and happy to answer.
Some of these bills too, they're gonna be highly specific to individual issues in your communities. So some of that, if there's questions or so forth, obviously we can answer them here, but there'll be some specific how you do impact fees and those types of things in your schedules. That will be highly specific, it will be changing, but there may be other considerations that you all have with regards to what you're trying to do, which we talked about. So 1001, most of you probably think there's opt-out clauses and all these other pieces as it passed the House, particularly in this area for central Indiana. I had a lot of impacts, a lot of concerns from a lot of mayors and county commissioners and so forth. That bill got dramatically changed in the second half by the state Senate. It still has a lot of things in here, which we could kind of go through, but the key items that you're going to need to really pay attention to, particularly on a local level, local governments, you have to conduct a housing review by the end of this year. They must review your UDO, which a lot of you do, Unified Development Ordinance, zoning regs, land development rules. You have to have a public hearing on how those impose or impact housing development. And obviously have some consideration for changes. A lot of communities here in central Indiana are updating your UDOs for various reasons throughout the year. Sometimes it's a sign issue, setbacks, whatever that may be, but be prepared to be ready to submit something to the state. Most importantly, is submitting a housing report to the state by January 1st, 2027. Must include whether a housing study has been completed, minutes, and new or amended zoning UDO changes. So they're record keeping. The next item is how long it takes from a petitioner submittal to actually all the steps in the process. If the petitioner asks for a delay, someone can't make a meeting, something's not ready, please, please, please make that note. Don't just say, hey, petitioner submitted May 1st, was heard by the APC on this date. If there's delays, particularly if it's on the petitioner, please note that, because here's why. They're going to use that data to then potentially achieve another legislative goal, which is going to upend your ability to do zoning. Be pretty crass, but effectively that's what it would be potentially in upcoming legislative sessions. Petitioners ask for delays all the time. There may be just, you know, hey, paperwork's not right, something, just note it. Don't have to go into a paragraph, but just note why that delay was asked for, why it was granted. I mean, oftentimes there's all sorts of good reasons why that is. So you have to adjust your fee structures by January of 2027 and ongoing. Your fee structures too are also tied to, there's some inflationary language there. They take effect in 180 days. A lot of times, local government will try to do like in December, process to take effect pretty quickly in the first of the year. And you may want to think about doing that earlier in the fourth quarter or even late third quarter, that 180 days to run, however you want to handle that as well. But the building construction fees must reflect the actual cost of the service. Fee increases are limited and regulated. We talked about the 180 days as well. And then you also have, if using the road impact fees, particularly some local government in central Indiana may have gotten creative with this. It has to be within 5 miles. 5 miles. Now there's some technical language of how that's applied. Be happy to talk to you more about that in specific situations on taxing districts and so forth. But it is 5 miles. It was at one time 1 mile. They They get expanded to 5 mile road impact fees. I don't have to explain that to this group. Very important, and very critical, but how you're using it, how you're planning your capital infrastructure plan, your corridors and so forth. 5 miles is what you're looking at for a road impact fee as well. You also have all sorts of other, the annual housing report, your stormwater quality manual, restrictions on compensatory storage requirements, AFCIs, which is a personal issue for me. The builders and apartment owners changed the electrical code after a long fight a couple of years ago on the electrical code. And they are no longer going to be required again to do AFCIs for whatever reason. But that's very quickly what happened on 1001. We could probably spend the entire day talking about this bill, and we probably all have really good thoughts and a lot of commentary of what the heck are they thinking. You also have some Central Indiana builders, to be frank, that probably weren't necessarily completely aligned with a lot of this, but look for future sessions where utilities, burying utilities and so forth, that process, utility relocation issues. You may not think, well, this group understands this. Utility relocation issues for home builders, even not just for building road, but trying to get their developments in and so forth. So that's something I think a lot of people probably find some common with. But 1001, you will see this in a different version, particularly based on those reports. So please, please, please keep accurate reporting.
All right, we'll move on to another bill and some happily answer questions on that. If you have any in. House and Old Act 1161, this is a local government bill. The primary thing that this does is makes all appointments at-will appointments. It clarifies that they are very much at-will appointments, but it has some guardrails in there. So they are at-will as long as the office holder who appointed the individual continues to hold the office, so you can't come after an individual. And then the board committee or body that appointed the individual has to retain all the same members who serve in that individual. Another few things that it does, it allows the county executive to establish salary schedules. You don't have an employee handbook in your county, you have one. And then it makes some changes with health boards, anything that exceeds lesser of $500,000 or 10% has to be pre-approved before the actions can be done. So those are the things in 1161. There's a couple of transportation related bills too, so I'll go through those. House and Old Act 1200, that's the B&B agency bill. The B&B is in the word next to us, so if you have questions, we can just go over there and answer them. But a couple things in there, one deals with NDOT contracting. So last year there was a bill passed that made everyone go to state budget committee for review. Something that wasn't thought was going to require NDOT to have to go for the state budget committee on all change orders for existing contracts. That's problematic. So this year that came in and removed that, so it should be still. Variable speed limit signs, no more, can't happen. From January 1. So that is a similar air improvement initiative there. The legal driving age is now 16 instead of 90 days. And then CDL requirements, it's actually just got some federal attention. I was watching the news this morning and saw it on there. That it requires that in order for an individual to hold a CDL in Indiana, they have to be English.
And it's gotten a lot of attention as well as the 16-year-old, a 16-year-old daughter at home that is waiting 90 days to correct. They ask, why do I still have to wait? Senate Bill 27, you're going to think of that as the stadium authority bill, otherwise known as stealing the Chicago Bears, hopefully. There are items in there that you care about, at least in the transportation sector. There's a provision, any project over $250 million has to be considered by the state budget committee. Many of you in this room understand what the state budget committee is. You have House Ways and Means Chairman Thompson, the Appropriations Chairman Mishler change each year. Who chairs that? Doesn't say to take a vote. Well, the vote is what goes on the agenda. So if they choose not to put it on the agenda, a project over $250 million cannot proceed and then not. That is directly targeted at mid-state school. It's called spade to state. That's what that is. It also impacts overall transportation funding. Renegotiation of the toll road lease usually nets about $1 billion with the B. That allocates $730 million to be available for the Bears, if you will, if they decide to come. I would call that kind of a stopgap backfill, if you will, on a stadium convention center deal, although that's just a stadium. Gary's doing a convention center, excuse me, but that's where the state, Porter County may not adopt some funding mechanisms, local taxes. They may do that. Why do you care? Typically that $1 billion goes into the overall NDOT program. So there are some changes potentially there. Contractors are paying attention to that and others as well. So just to pay attention for that. 1406, which is the tax and fiscal matters. You have a small town opportunity initiative, as well as a redevelopment tax credits. It requires the IEDC to award $35 million to development authorities each fiscal year. May be granted to taxpayers proposing qualified investment and qualified redevelopment site pursuant to a development plan. There's all sorts of different particulars on that. And that bill actually has some opportunities, I think, for a lot of people to potentially take advantage of when it comes to economic development projects.
And that's not new money, there's really dedicated to those types of projects, and it's really pulling out $300 million for the redevelopment extra 15. The Department of Local Government Finance bill, before they can read this bill, it's only about like 480 pages, so you've got your own risk, but has a couple things in here, short-term rentals. So it prohibits a local unit from prohibiting short-term rentals in your area unless it was adopted unless the ordinance was adopted prior to January 1, 2026. You're still going to be prevented from having to eventually, but those can stay until January 1.
Rolled off. So what some local governments are looking at is potentially doing, I hesitate to call it a registry, but there's a lot of public safety issues with regards to, let's say you roll up on a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, you roll up with X amount of equipment if there is a call. If you know it's on a short-term rental, you may respond with more equipment, more personnel, depending on the individual situation. So communities are looking at that. Speedway actually did a really nice ordinance, may have been a resolution, but Speedway did some nice language on this probably about over a year ago. I would encourage you to take a look at that. Some others are doing that. This is in response to Carmel and Fishers doing some things on short-term ones as well.
These tracks, these advisors, the original bill required that you RFP every couple of years. That was removed, and now we have a new supervisor, you have to follow with those. So that's a change there. Let's see, data centers. So when I talked to you all last, there was a bill that was basically going to take away all of the control for data centers. We're going to make their permitted uses and they can essentially go anywhere. That has been removed, and now they have to enter into a local agreement, and then 1% of their exempted sales tax has to be submitted. Right on 0. They were trying at 1.7%, which would have been great, but now it's back down to 1. So there's still some local control has been retained there, and then
Yeah, lit language in here is local income tax. It was in Senate Rolled Act 1, 2028, which coincides with voting for that would be required during a municipal election cycle. Basically kick that can down the road to 29. There is still some consternation and some infighting, putting it mildly, between counties and cities. Please have everyone here behave, but counties and cities do have some different perspectives on this lit and how that's handled.
Moving on to another bill, House Bill Rec 1348, seals for the freeze trap and stumpage, so your local utility will want to pay attention to this one. As far as freeze traps go, the big thing to know is it prohibits any blanket statements or blanket requirements for freeze traps, so you can say, it needs to be 1,000-gallon freeze trap no matter what, instead of properly sized by a licensed architect. And then the septic requirements, it requires that a wastewater treatment plant continues to accept septic under certain circumstances, unless for some reason they cannot. Another transportation related bill is Senate Bill Act 179. This is the NDOT agency bill. Has quite a few things in there. The first is the NDOT IMPO assignment. So that is basically allowing the Indiana NDOT to waive civil immunity. So they're still held to the federal requirements, but they can approve some of those environmental things so that they don't have to be done by the federal government. So really that will just speed things up. Lane mile distribution, it accelerates lane mile distribution by moving up the date from June 30th of 2027 to June 30th. Wheel tax, so it essentially prohibits stacking of the wheel taxes. So but then it also grandfathers in if you have already done that. So the law got changed last year that allowed for stacking of wheel taxes. And they came back this year and they said, well, wait, that's not fair. We don't do that anymore. However, if you have implemented one, it's gone into effect before December 31st, 2026, you can keep that. So nothing prohibits you from adopting wheel tax at county and municipality, but it's going to be divvied up so that they charge.
Yeah, some of the concerns was how community crossing funds were going to be eligible. So that wheel tax became a little bit more, much more attractive to some communities that may or may not already have that. Community crossings also was amended here, distribution from those funds, allocating an additional $75 million for applicants who were denied funding in December. So think of this when you're handling the budget, they just encumbered those funds and moved them into this fiscal year as well. So those funds continue to be available as well. They changed the match for City of Indianapolis for their $50 million as well in that bill.
Yeah, I completed that this morning too, and but right now, dollar for dollar, the city of Minneapolis can contribute $50 million in new funds, and then get a match from the state for $50 million to be used on certain things. It's tiering that going forward, I think until 2031. So it's $50 million this year, 60 or $80 million, $100 million. There's no there between now and 2031, but it's tiering that so that they will get additional money, but they also have to come up with those dollars.
And there's one small Christmas gift. If you just so happen to be a town or city between 10,000 people and 12,500, your match goes from 50% to 20%. So we never do special legislation, but that's special legislation. So Senate Enrolled Act 270, which is township mergers. You may want to buckle up for this one if you can follow this. There's a scoring evaluation by DLGF on points. DLGF must evaluate Indiana townships, except those in Marion County, assign performance points based on operational and reporting criteria. Points are attributed for when a township fails to meet certain indicators, such as provide township assistance, actively manage fire protection or EMS, file required financial reports, maintain required budget, reporting compliance, and a list of several others. The designation of underperforming townships receiving 4 or more points are classified as designated townships. DLGF must publish the list of designated townships by December 31st of 2026, end of this calendar year. The required structural changes, the township must either merge with another township, reorganize with a municipality if at least 80% of the township boundaries overlap a municipality and at least 51% of the township population lives within the municipality. You can do a township to township merger, which is spelled out pretty well. And then there's a municipal reorganization process as well. Two different processes there. There's a transition interim governance and funding, and there's a timeline. County executives must determine merger groupings by October 1st of 2027. So the DLGF has to file a report by the end of this calendar year. County executives must determine merger groupings by October 1st of 2027. Final merger plans and budget must be submitted to DLGF by February 2028. And all township mergers must take effect of January 1 of 2029. So they do have a timeline there. I think this potentially will probably be tweaked in next session as well, but we'll see where that goes. Township mergers, elimination of township government has been discussed for some of us for 20, 30 years, if not further. So this is the furthest this has ever gone. I guarantee you there'll be some adjustments and changes, most likely with regards to this. Senate Enrolled Act 285. It's a housing matters, but it's labeled really a street camping. So if you have a homeless camp, if you will, on a street corner, public land, government-owned land, there's prescriptions to really try to have law enforcement really connect individuals with services, addiction services, mental health issues, all that to try to get into a housing first type strategy. This is a very big issue in our urban areas, but it's also popping up in other areas as well across the state. But it does prohibit an individual from camping, sleeping, or using for long-term shelter in a political subdivisions. Requires that law enforcement individual try to get that individual some help. They can charge them if there's things that happen, if you will, under criminal law. It reads, but proceed under emergency detention procedure and not the criminal law. We're not trying to get law enforcement to, frankly, make somebody a felon that may be doing finding their way on a street corner at this point. It does create some defenses and so forth and reporting requirements as well. But it's an interesting bill. Cindy Carrasco, Senator Carrasco worked on this. Pretty comprehensive. Expect some other changes, trying to connect. These are the hardest cases of homelessness and trying to connect individuals and getting those individuals some help and safety, whether it's freezing cold, hot, or frankly, they're just dealing with some addictions, a lot of mental health challenges as well. But this is typically the hardest group to try to really address. We have some notable dead bills. Sometimes it's real hard to pass stuff. But usually there's a lot of bad ideas, so you play more whack-a-mole a lot of times in short session. So there are a couple bills that we got some questions from you all as well, but we were able to tamp those down. Some though may be dead, but some of their provisions may have found home in other places as well.
That's the case for all these. No. There's a regional economic development bill was still in the line. That was the provision within 6 that I talked about with the redevelopment tax credits like that, and a much larger bill, and all those other things. Fun, and they will be burning in next session now. There was an automated traffic enforcement safety bill and a vulnerable road user bill. Those both died, actually didn't see during the session, that were brought by Representative Blake Johnson, who's great, and I think Mary presenting at something for the IMPO coming up, and he is great. His bills have received hearings in the past. I just think short session didn't really on the time how to prioritize anything like ADOS bill and BAP bill. Land use development, that was a big data center bill. Expect more on data centers, and so that's everybody knows that. We expect much more regulation.
This passed the House 5445, I believe, and went over to the Senate, did not receive, went over to the Senate, did not receive a hearing. But some of the issues are going to be continued to talk about, even St. Jerome's too. That was another call.
There will be a bill that people's there were several that dealt with drones and that could impact and the use of them for. And within the county, it was prohibiting drone use pretty heavily, so. There's a good thing I've written, is trying to get up there. And then there was some income tax bills and then a bill dealing with drive-through safety lanes. My first thought when I read that bill was something like on Rockville Road, how they're trying to get rid of lane there, but it actually had to do with restaurant drive-throughs and creating safety lanes. People could get on. I'm probably gonna take things at some point here to remember, but anyway, that is about it, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Did you say you anticipate the Lake Johnson automated enforcement to probably come back next year?
He's brought it for several years,
Okay.
this is maybe the fourth year I've seen that bill.
Okay,
Just
no interest statewide in or?
it received a hearing, a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, and I can't remember exactly why. It moved forward, but, I think it might have passed over the house.
Other questions?
In Senate Bill 179, there was an amendment added kind of late about giving or allowing NDOT to have a preference, or show preference in selections for LPAs that had enhanced asset management plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Additional characteristics and deficiencies in the road, what are, I guess, was there a backstory to that? It doesn't sound like it's a requirement yet, it's just LPAs that have that additional information, maybe get.
Yeah, they may get preference, in a working with grants, if they have an asset. I'm not sure the reason behind that, but that is in there, but it's not required.
If you talk to Secretary Bugler, he just wants to know how you're planning this. How they utilize that, it's on the designs. But it's a May, I believe it's a May.
Yeah.
Well, so, challenge. So I would encourage you to take a look, if you don't have one, take a look at the process and consider.
Anybody looked at that? Or noticed that was in there, thought about how they would implement it? I asked at the, at road school, at least for the county level, LTAP meeting, asked afterwards about that. And didn't have any information of what that might mean, or what some of the additional, or what some of the definitions of how we would acquire some of the information, getting into roughness. Was there going to be a standardized methodology that we should follow? Is anybody city-wise, town-wise, or anything?
We can look into that more, try to talk about it, see if they have any information, why.
I have a question about the road impact fee, 5 miles radius. And I apologize if you guys mentioned that before, but when does that take into effect? And how do the cities like track it?
Most of that goes into effect July 1 of 2026, some of it is retroactive, so
Your reality of this though too is something that I've asked question. I can deepen your question as well. Is that you have a project already planned, you have a transportation plan based on that project, and that project's now just starting to break ground. And so you haven't received all those impact fees at this point, but yet you on paper have projects already committed, if you will, for those types of funds. I mean, theoretically. And then all of a sudden now it's officially restricted to 5 miles, where you may have been outside of that. I mean, there's all sorts of scenarios, right? So I would tell you right now, any project that's being put in front of a city or county, start operating under that 5 miles. But the issue is projects that have already been approved and when they come through and how that impacts your transportation plan. I would tell you that I think that's the bigger rub for some communities. It's, well, I already had allocated the plan to receive X. actually is gonna go to these projects, which now are maybe outside of the 5 miles. I think that's gonna be a bigger issue. And that's gonna be a case by case. That's where I think you're gonna have to talk to your senator, your state rep, and really kind of lay out the business case, why that decision was made, why that may be there. I mean, I kind of went on a tangent on the question, but I mean, to me, that's a question I have.
It's for any impact fees implemented acquisition.
So, but the question that I have is that communities have projects that have been approved and they haven't. And so I'm like, well, it was approved, but then they come for, some slight change because, banks aren't gonna finance that style, or they want a different road or something of that nature, then how does that impact what may have already been approved? Because theoretically, they're making modifications, getting into the weeds, but this stuff I'm concerned.
I mean, it just opens a bunch of different questions, or does it take into effect when it's assessed, when it's paid, and then?
That's what I was gonna say, when you said implemented, is that, when you say implemented, is that collected it from the developer, or is that doing construction? But I think those are gonna be city attorney questions, stuff we're gonna.
Yeah,
They might split out in there.
yeah. I may have asked this a couple of city attorneys, just FYI, because I'm concerned about it first. So, and professional, so it's an issue. Because there's a lot of communities, particularly in central Indiana, that are sitting on, I shouldn't say the city or the county sitting on, but the developer just hasn't started. But it's an approved plan. So they can go build. If for whatever reason they just have not, or they haven't sought final. I mean, it doesn't always happen.
Because you can have two developments on both sides of the city. And then that goes into the bucket. And you have a total of, let's say, $5, you have a total of $10. How are you gonna figure out where those fives go?
And you gotta allocate and then report how we use it. So, which is gonna be different as well. Don't disagree. Don't disagree. But we had to fight pretty hard just to get to the 5 miles. Multifamily was really upset with impact fees. They want them to be basically immediately surrounding multifamily development. And that they were pretty firm on that. So if you get apartments, yeah. Sorry. But yeah, the Indiana Apartment Association, the Indiana Builders Association, and Indiana Builders, the three have really pushed it. Any other questions or? Good question now, because that's the right question.
Reach out if you have any other questions. Okay, and we'll talk to NDOT and see who can get some from that, and we'll start
Sounds good.
I just want to put in a little real quick that, in May, so they said we're doing a meeting and after. So we have kind of everything, we'll be getting the, planning department, staff together. Community for that. Which legislation is going to be the topic for that meeting, for May 7th, for the.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So these guys are coming back at policy, just to reiterate, the elected officials, I apologize for those of you that may come to both meetings, you'll hear it twice, but also maybe between now and then you may have additional questions or clarifications that you guys can. I'm going to go ahead and roll to executive director updates. A couple of things, so the IMPO gets federally certified by FHWA and FTA. We do have our federal certification. April 14th and 15th, so kind of right over policy. It'll be the day before and then the afternoon going to this. WTS Speech Scholarship event. I'm very bummed about that. We will be this week sending out a survey to all of the memberships. Feel free to provide us feedback that goes directly to FHWA and FTA. It will also go out to the public a little bit different this time under this administration. FHWA will not come and report out in findings. They will meet with our chair and vice chair and communicate those to our chair and vice chair. They're not going to stand at the podium and present those findings. Also, new administration, right? The pendulum is swinging from one direction to the other. I have been through this process 4 times in the IMPO, 1 in Michigan. It feels a little bit different. So I don't like we never really know what to expect when we walk into certification, but just feels a little bit different. So stay tuned. I feel comfortable that we are meeting all of the CFRs and things that we are supposed to do, but having the dialogue will always a good opportunity to get in front of FHWA and FTA. So next item, Jennifer Dunn wanted me to remind you that we are opening the functional classification process on April 13th. So in a couple of weeks, and those submissions need to be submitted by June 5th. So if you have a roadway that needs to be reclassified on the functional classification system, now it is the time, or in 2 weeks, the time to begin that paperwork process. So, right, we look at the system as a whole. So, right, if your neighbor is reclassifying a road and you are not, like, right, you're looking at that holistically, but from our perspective and the way for that information to that. So, just a reminder, I've already covered the planning roundtables. I did. Patrick and Abby, we finished or started last night our IMPO speaker series. For last night, we'll have about 50 people talking about housing. Our next is June 10th, and she made reference. I know we have invited Blake Johnson to speak about safety, roadway safety, and safety technology. That's on June 10th, August 25th. Micromobility on trails. So a couple of our communities are talking about, right, e-bikes and scooters, and then, right, I'm running along the trail, and somebody else is there with a stroller, walking the dog. Right, some of that micromobility on trails and the safety aspect of it. So that is on August 25th, late summer, and then on November 4th, we are talking about transit and stories from the street. So those are all taking place downtown Indianapolis at the Indiana Historic Center, Historical Society. Thank you. So if you are interested in joining us, they are typically 4:30 to 6:30. So just an FYI, social media, you'll see it in our newsletter, all the things. I did also want to just mention, if you haven't seen, a marker bill has been dropped. The current transportation bill expires on September 30th. I had the opportunity to walk the hill and do congressional updates, congressional staffer updates 2 weeks ago. We are expecting the transportation bill to be a continuing resolution this year. The Senate is interested in taking it up. But if you are actively having conversations on the congressional level, right, we have 2 members, Andre Carson and Jefferson, who both serve on the CNI committee, which is very exciting. So I have a slew of talking points of things that I think we are trying to get out of the new transportation. So I don't know, I'm sure you guys are probably members of your own national organization, but also have talking points. But just I have been watching and participating in the process. Pretty exciting. Any questions or announcements? Anything I missed? If you haven't had the opportunity after we adjourn, come over and introduce yourself to Laura. Other than that, I'm looking for a motion and a second for adjournment. Ryan, thank you. The motion and the second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. I oppose likewise. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
Been there, Mark? A month ago, Holly and I were, yeah, we started riding around in the car. I think like- We could try to talk with
Yeah.
We're not gonna spend any time with the It's gone now. I tried to.